Elena stood in the dim light of her makeshift kitchen, her heart racing as she stared down at the last can of Spam. The metallic label glinted ominously under the flickering bulb, reminding her of the stakes at hand. She had only 3 hours until the warlord arrived, and within that time, she needed to create a feast that would not only impress him, but also secure vital resources for her starving community. Her fingers trembled as she grasped the can, the weight of her responsibility heavy on her shoulders. This single item was more than just sustenance, it was hope wrapped in metal. She rummaged through the sparse supplies on the shelf. A few wilted vegetables lay forgotten in a corner, their colors muted but not entirely lost. A handful of dried herbs clung to life in a jar, their scent faint but still evocative of the flavors that once filled her kitchen. Inspiration struck as she visualized the dish, a Spam-stuffed vegetable casserole crowned with a herb-infused crust. It could be a spectacle, a dish that transformed the mundane into something extraordinary. But first, she needed to strategize. Elena began to sketch a plan on a scrap of paper, her pencil scratching against the surface. She mapped out the flavors she could evoke, the textures she could create, and the colors she would showcase. Each element was a piece of a puzzle that needed to fit perfectly to convey her desperation and creativity. As she worked, a sense of urgency washed over her, urging her to act quickly. With a determined nod, she tucked the can of Spam into her bag alongside her crude, hastily conceived menu. She stepped outside, the harsh sun glaring down on the settlement's remnants, a reminder of the world that had once thrived. The outskirts loomed ahead, a dangerous territory teeming with scavengers looking for their next meal. Elena's heart pounded as she navigated through the rubble, her senses heightened. Every rustle of a leaf or snap of a twig sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. She spotted a patch of wild herbs, swaying gently in the breeze, and made her way toward it, crouching low to avoid detection. The earthy scent filled her nostrils as she carefully gathered handfuls of the green bounty, her fingers deftly plucking the leaves. Just as she secured her foraging, a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision. Panic surged as she realized she wasn't alone. A scavenger was nearby, his eyes scanning the area. She held her breath, willing herself to stay still, heart racing as he moved closer. With a mix of instinct and fear, she ducked behind a crumbling wall, hoping her camouflage would be sufficient. The scavenger's footsteps faded, and she exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment of relief. But time was slipping away, and she had to move. Gathering the last of the herbs, she sprinted back toward the safety of her kitchen, the weight of her bag feeling heavier with each step. Every second counted, and she could almost hear the warlord's anticipated arrival echoing in her mind, heightening her urgency. Back in her kitchen, she spread her foraged treasures across the counter, marveling at the vibrant greens and the comforting presence of the Spam. The clock ticked mercilessly as she prepared to cook. The challenge ahead loomed. She needed to elevate the humble Spam into a gourmet dish worthy of the warlord's palate. With only limited equipment, a battered frying pan and a makeshift oven, Elena felt the pressure mount. She began chopping and sautéing, infusing the air with tantalizing aromas. But as she assembled the dish, the pan sputtered and a plume of smoke rose. She cursed under her breath as she adjusted the heat, desperate not to burn her creation. The first attempt at the casserole was a charred disappointment, and her heart sank as she scraped it into the compost pile. She took a moment to breathe deeply, grounding herself. This was not the end. It was a lesson. The second attempt was better, but still not quite right. The flavors failed to meld. She refused to give up. Her community's survival depended on her success. With renewed determination, she focused on the elements. A touch of salt, a hint of spice, the fresh herbs she had risked her life to gather. The third casserole bubbled gently, the colors vibrant and inviting in the fading light. As she pulled it from the makeshift oven, it looked promising, but the real test lay ahead. She plated the dish with care, draping it in a rich herb-infused glaze that glimmered like a beacon of hope. Elena stepped back to admire her work, but the moment of triumph was fleeting. As she set the table, a thought struck her. She also needed to tell a story, to weave a narrative that would resonate with the warlord. A story that would connect him to her dish and her community's plight. She paced the room, words flowing through her mind, but time was slipping away. The warlord was almost there. With only moments to spare, Elena crafted a tale of resilience, of a community that had fought to survive against insurmountable odds, and how the spam, once a symbol of despair, had become a centerpiece of hope. As she rehearsed her words, she felt her heart pound with both fear and resolve. When the warlord finally arrived, his presence filled the room with a palpable tension, and she stood firm, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. With a deep breath she stepped forward, presenting her dish and sharing her story. The moment hung in the air, a fragile balance between hope and fear, as she poured every ounce of her passion into her words. She watched as he took a bite, the world narrowing to that singular moment where her fate, and that of her community, rested in the hands of the warlord.